My name is Nicholas Deeney. I started the business coming up to 2 years ago, and my background is pure science. So that's a photo of me, a few less gray hairs than there are now. But my background is neuroscience, really. I studied neuroscience in Trinity back in the day, and that's kind of where I was first introduced to these kind of products, the neurochemical interactions in the brain, the nervous system, and throughout the body. What happens when you take drugs? I don't mean illicit drugs, just drugs in general. What are the side effects? What are the benefits? How do they work? I was just fascinated in all. Then I moved on from there to UCD to do a master's in biotechnology. So that's just the use of kind of biological systems, cells, tissues, the human body really, and combining that with technology. And it covers medical devices to pharmaceuticals, everything, kind of anything that really touches on that area. It's a pretty big field. And then after that, I went into a pharmaceutical company called Jazz Pharmaceuticals, then went into a medical device company called Trinity Biotech in Bray, in Wicklow. And there I was working on product development, process development, basically any bugs or fixes that needed to be made in the product or process itself. That's what myself and the team did. And then I went into a PhD in bioengineering. So using stem cells to grow different organs. So we actually used urine to grow urine. So in urine, there's cells. Use those cells to turn them into small brains, kidneys, that kind of stuff. Pretty amazing research. And then in the middle of that, I kind of hit a wall of anxiety and stress. It was just really huge amount of stress. You can imagine PhDs just at times can be overwhelming, and just it's a steep learning curve. So at this stage, I went to the doctor because of all this, and I started getting panic attacks, all that kind of stuff. It ended up being a whole load of stuff. It wasn't really the PhD. It was kind of more personal issues. And then what GPs naturally try and do is go down the pharmaceutical route, which is fair enough. That's what they've been trained to do. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted a natural remedy or a natural product, plant-based product to see if it could help. My brother lives in London, where obviously the UK and North America, when it comes to this industry and these products, CBD, I mean, they're just much more up the curve, and it has certainly evolved, and there's a huge amount of progress in the UK, North America, really North America, to be honest. So he recommended CBD. I didn't really know what it was, looked up the science of it. So I gave it a bash, and then after a few days, thought this isn't great. After a couple of weeks, thought, okay, it's picking up. After a month, I thought, wow, this is absolutely fantastic stuff. I remember just thinking, how's this not on the shelves of every health store, shop, chemist, pharmacy, everything. I thought it was brilliant. And then actually within 6 months of kind of researching the industry, at the time it was around 2020, in around when COVID started, I noticed I was looking up the lab results of different brands, and I found it less than impressive. There was stuff that was in these products that shouldn't have been. There was inconsistency with the lab results, all that kind of stuff. So to the point where when you come from pharma background, when everything has to be kind of within 0.001%, or else it was thrown out, I was mesmerized at the poor quality stuff that was allowed on the market. So that's how, after that, that's literally why Vita Botanica was established, and purely based on the poor quality products, and then also turning into a bit of an advocate myself, because I was using it. So then going into CBD, so the number one question I get everywhere, will I get high? How much, like if you take a certain amount, do you start getting hallucinating or get some sort of psychoactive effects? No, that is plain and simple, no. And if you do, that is a very poor quality product that should not be on the shelves of anywhere, to be honest, whether you're in North America or UK or in Ireland. What causes that high that people associate this industry with is a chemical compound called THC, and that is what differentiates hemp from marijuana. So if you think about it as an umbrella plant, cannabis is at the very top, and then see up here you can see marijuana is high THC. Hemp is actually, see this 0.3%. It's actually 0.2% in Europe. It's 0.3% in the States. It's just a bit higher. Now, even if, to be honest, you have 1%, you're still not going to have any effects, but naturally, just for safety reasons, it's brought down to 0.2 and 0.3%. So that's the big difference. Hemp, it does not get you high. It doesn't have any of those kind of negative side effects. Well, some people might say good side effects, but we're certainly not in that industry of trying to legalize marijuana and all that kind of stuff. Now, actually, side topic is that's actually the studies in marijuana and cancer treatment is brilliant at the moment. But yeah, it's the 0.3% THC against the high THC. So that's the biggest kind of, if you're to take away only one thing, that take that away, that hemp is nothing got to do with marijuana. So in these plants, there are what you call CBD and THC. They're called cannabinoids. So kind of whatever about that term cannabinoid, but there's a lot of them. It's just a compound found in these plants, and your body actually produces things, these compounds, not these exact ones, but ones that are structurally very similar, and they're called endocannabinoids. So they're just produced in the system. So they found that these compounds found in this plant are structurally so similar that they end up, they can interact with different parts of the body and activate certain signaling pathways, and then also repress them too. So it was really in 2018 when this whole industry kind of kicked off in the US. They brought out the US Farm Bill, and that legalized this whole industry in North America. In the US, and that kicked off all the research, all the studies. So that's why if you look up studies, they're also recent in that they're only being published. Generally, it takes a year or two to plan the study, and then it could take between 1 and 10 years to actually carry out the study, and then maybe another year of actually analyzing the results. So these are long studies. So the ones that are only recently been published are very much preliminary studies, where the big ones are still going on at the moment. The main areas in which CBD and these kind of products are being researched is for MS, so multiple sclerosis. So because of the kind of twitching and muscle spasms, because it dampens those muscle spasms. So that's a big area. Fibromyalgia, which overlaps a huge amount the symptoms with ME. So that's why that's very much relevant. Fibromyalgia has been definitely the most positive results have come out of those studies. Anxiety and depression, which is the reason I got into it initially, is more the anxiety side than the depression side. And then in turn, that affects your sleep. And sleep naturally is affected whenever some sort of disorder like this, you're diagnosed with it, your anxiety levels shoot up, and then that affects your sleep. So it either directly or indirectly affects your sleep in that way. And then one of the biggest ones is the pain and inflammation. Pain and inflammation, because it's all interconnected with the nervous system. All these things here are nervous system based disorders. So the fact that CBD, THC, any of these cannabinoids interact with the nervous system, that's why these studies have been carried out. It's mainly the nervous system based disorders. So the endocannabinoid system is what these compounds interact with. And what that system is, we'll just call it the ECS. So what the ECS is, it's a vast vast signaling network that's densely packaged throughout our brains and bodies, and they kind of innervate different areas and different systems, as you can see here in the top left, from brain, lungs, vascular system, bones, skin, immune system. Immune system is a big one, and that's how it comes into inflammation, because immune system is the main driver of inflammation. So it's literally everywhere, this system in our body. It's connected with every system in your body. So that's why you hear kind of these things saying CBD, oh, it's good for this, it's good for that. How are those related? It's actually just that because the CBD interacts with this system, it kind of interacts with almost every system in the body. And this system in particular is responsible, the main things it's responsible is for inflammation, immune system, homeostasis, which is just a fancy term for having a steady internal state. So the likes of having normal blood flow, or having a consistent temperature, or breathing consistently, that kind of thing. So it's just keeping a steady line of the things in your body. And if you go up or below that line, it tries to bring it back. Your body automatically tries to bring it back to that kind of steady line. So these cannabinoids here, you got here in the small red circles, these are the ones that are actually produced. So this is a cell here, right? And they produce these compounds, and these are the ones that are produced already in the body. And then there's stuff, this is another cell, the surface here, there's little arms or branches that kind of protrude outwards, and they catch these. Think of it like someone catching a ball. The ball is the compound, and then it interacts with the arm on the surface of the cell. And what that does, it sends a signal into the cell, and then they in turn release more compounds. And then essentially it's just a cascading effect like that, where the signaling is just transferred from one cell to the next cell to the next. And that's how it interacts with the body. So when you have the CBD itself, because its structure is so similar to the ones our body produces, they can also interact with these arms or branches. So that is the kind of fascinating side of it, and it's purely based on structure of the CBD molecule. So that's how it ends up kind of getting into almost every system in your body, just because it can interact with the surface of these cells. And what it does is, as I said, when it goes out of balance, when your body is out of balance, let's say your nervous system is overactive. What it does is your body releases all these chemicals, or CBD is put into your body, and then it tries to bring these overactive nerve cells, bring them back to the baseline, bring them back to the normal kind of steady state, which is the homeostasis word that I had mentioned previously. There are really three to four main areas that CBD research is kind of focusing on. Here's the pain and inflammation side. Here's the anxiety and stress, and that's just an overactive nervous system. And here, that's also an overactive nervous system with the immune system. So it's kind of complements both systems. They're both overactive, and that's what causes inflammation. And then both of these have either a direct or indirect effect on sleep difficulties. Naturally, if you're in pain, or if your certain muscles and joints are inflamed, you're going to have a hard time sleeping. And same if you're stressed and anxious about, let's say, the current situation or the current disorder, that in turn affects sleep as well. As we all know, there is no FDA approved ME treatment. It only they're the treatments that target the symptoms. So they're more symptom alleviators. And that's why CBD, I think, is relevant here, because of course it can't target the exact mechanism of what causes ME, which is also kind of unknown at the moment, but it targets the symptoms, and that's why it's relevant today. So the muscle and joint inflammation aspect, the sleep difficulties, and the anxiety and stress that comes with it. So Here's the most notable research studies published to date. Now, there are hundreds really being published every quarter because, as I said, since 2018, it's really, all the studies have really skyrocketed. So since the Farm Bill, really, same with the UK now, loads of studies are being taken on board because they're now regulatory wise, they've caught up with the industry and they're pushing along. So they're looking to kind of introduce these products into the industry or into the public market properly. As in right now, it's just a regulatory mess and it's difficult to get onto the market. So in well, as I said, the research studies primarily target the neurological and nervous system, as I said, because that's what the molecules interact with. One thing I found very, very interesting is that the opioid prescriptions, so opioids are painkillers, the likes of codeine, that kind of thing, some legal, some not legal. The legal prescriptions that in the States since 2018, they've halved since these high CBD products have been on the market. And that's fascinating because it shows that people are now there, because there's also an opioid epidemic or endemic in the States. That is that's kind of strain on that endemic, because they're now choosing natural remedies that also have effects on pain and inflammation, i.e. they alleviate the pain and inflammation aspect of things. So that's a very interesting side of it. And then this study in 2017, probably the most relevant of this talk here today. So I'm not sure who is aware of what central sensitization is, but just in case, I'll go over it. So what central sensitization is that it is basically when your nervous system, particular parts of your nervous system, they're oversensitized to many different types of stimuli. So for example, light touch can be, or light and soft touch of things like, let's say, brushing against a wall or someone touching your skin, that can be seen as quite, or felt as quite painful for some people. And that's what central sensitization. It's not just pain or touch, by the way. It's sensitive to heat, cold, bright or flashing lights. And this sensitization leads to headaches, irritation, pain, nausea, all that kind of stuff. And this is a key characteristic, this central sensitization behind both fibromyalgia and ME. And in this study in particular, CBD intake was demonstrated to desensitize or dampen those cells that were responsible for this sensitization in the nervous system. So they brought the cells down, again, going back to the kind of homeostasis where the whole body wants to be in a central line, not up above it, not below it, i.e. not upregulated or downregulated, wants to just keep it plain, boring, simple, straight line stuff. So it brings the oversensitized cells down back to the normal state. And it in turn led to less headaches, less sensory overload, less irritation, less pain. So that's quite a significant study that was published in 2017. And then again, as I spoke about the homeostasis, when this study in particular, it was done in Italy in 2016. It was published, where they were looking at blood pressure, stress response, blood flow, that kind of thing. So MEs and fibromyalgia. The reason I bring in fibromyalgia, as I said, it has overlapping symptoms. It's linked to an abnormal or dysregulated homeostasis. So again, up and down as opposed to steady. In this study in particular, CBD intake was the focus of it was looking at the homeostasis when CBD was introduced, and these are placebo clinical trials. They're proper clinical trials where one person takes a placebo, i.e. a sugar tablet or something like that, and then the other person is taking CBD. So it's completely blind tested. Nobody knows, not even the guys not even the researchers know. It's completely random. Only at the end do they find out on a computer, let's say, that has all the information of who's taking what, who's taking placebo. So it's completely blind tested to everyone. So CBD in this study contributed to more regulated and more controlled internal state. And that's a big thing, because again, that's a homeostasis is dysregulated in ME. And then two other studies that are both look at, one of them was quite old in 2009, now quite old. If you look at studies in typical pharmaceutical studies looking at drugs, they go back to the 30s and 40s. So 2009 would actually be considered a very recent study. But anyway, the other one in 2016 and the one in 2009, they both looked at how effective it was in looking at inflammation in the nervous system, and then the kind of follow-on effects on migraines and IBS. So IBS is linked to the brain because there's what's called a neuron, a GI neuron brain axis. So GI is gastrointestinal tract. So there's a big connection between the nervous system and IBS because it's directly linked, i.e. nerves go straight down there, and so that's a different side of the story, but that's why they're looking at IBS, just to give you a bit of information. They introduce cannabis-based treatments, not just cannabis, but not marijuana, but hemp-based treatments, and they found that they significantly brought down inflammation in both of these studies. When it both came to IBS, it brought down migraines, and then it brought down general inflammation with muscles and joints. And that's why you'll see, if you've ever those who look at CBD websites, you see a lot of muscle and joint balms or creams and that kind of stuff. It's because it's mainly used for the inflammation side of things. Because a lot of people ask me, why is there suddenly creams and stuff coming out? Like, so we have a particular cream that's used for, I actually use it for psoriasis, because that's an inflammation, skin inflammation. People use it for acne and that kind of stuff as well. It's purely the inflammation side of things that it's targeting there. And then, because the inflammation is also obviously a big side with ME and chronic inflammation, it's not just like, let's say you get a cut and then you have damaged skin and you're inflamed. It's not something like that. It's more for chronic inflammation. That's why they're looking at the likes of MS and that kind of things. These are chronic disabilities, disorders, diseases, whatever you want to call them. The chronic, they're not acute. So people think, oh, well, painkiller, if I have a headache, can I just take a drop of CBD? That's not how it works. That's not the goal of CBD. That's not how it's supposed to be used. And here is a case study. A girl called M. Franklin. It's quite, obviously, as you can see, it's quite recent. She published her own personal journey in 2020. She's a young girl, as you can see, in her late 20s. She, in her late teens, she noticed her energy levels were progressively getting worse, to the point where she only really had a small window each day where she had energy and could really do anything, meet up with your friends, work, kind of even eat, drink, shower, that kind of things, kind of the typical day-to-day activities. So her window is getting smaller and smaller each year. And then when she was 19, she was diagnosed with ME. And at this stage, when her energy was gone, it was kind of really gone. Like, she couldn't do anything. She was bedridden. She'd go for several sleeps a day, and even at the end of it, she wouldn't feel refreshed or anything. Kind of staying in bed for 16 to 18 hours a day, kind of stuff. And along with her energy loss, she started experiencing increased joint pain and cognitive difficulties. So her memory loss was, or her memory was declining. General concentration was down. She couldn't really she was struggling with day-to-day tasks, and she eventually had to quit her job because she was working, I think it was somewhere like Debenhams. Every 30 minutes she had to go into the bathroom and have a lie down for 10-15 minutes, and that obviously is quite unsustainable. So she eventually had to leave. She managed to get to university after year 2. She was enrolled in a 4-year degree. After year 2, she had to leave because she just couldn't go on. She couldn't handle the amount of work and what was required, and the amount of concentration needed. And then it just really got worse and worse, where to the point where her mum actually had to quit her own job to become a 24-hour carer for her, and then to the point where she had to feed her herself. She couldn't walk, she couldn't talk, she couldn't stand or anything. Her arms were coming, not paralyzed, but she just didn't have the energy to actually really move them much. So it got significantly worse. It fell off a cliff kind of stuff. And 6 years on from the diagnosis, she tried CBD oil. And now this is also only one case. I'm not trying to say this is this wonder product, but there are a lot of cases. If you actually just type it into Google, you can quite quickly find a lot of these types of cases. I came across quite a few of them. So yeah, after 6 years, she tried CBD. Again, she did similar to what I did, just started looking up different brands, what differentiated them from each other. And then after a couple days, no result. After a week, no result. After 2 weeks, not much result. After 3 weeks, she said she could feel, okay, this is just as about to stop taking it. She said, okay, this is doing a little bit. After a month, okay, this is definitely doing something. After 4 to 6 weeks, it seemed to have a big effect, positive effect, of course, where she ended up becoming a freelance digital marketer at home. So she was working back to work. Her mum got back to work. She could end up going out and meet friends. Now she was still tired, of course. It didn't completely get rid of, or one, as I said, a wonder drug where she could suddenly do everything, but it became much more manageable. She could start introducing different activities into her days and start doing day-to-day tasks, considering she was bedridden and couldn't even eat herself. She was obviously had this doctor that was at first skeptical, but said, here, look, try it, you've nothing to lose. Doctors being skeptical of this industry is kind of definitely what you do expect now. Even though there's so much research published, they just want to go the classical pharmaceutical route. But anyhow, her doctor ended up putting out a statement saying taking the CBD oil has been absolutely vital to her recovery process, and that he insisted that she kept it up, because of, obviously, after only 6 weeks in the grand scheme of things, taking something that's very short period of time. And now to the point where she's spending a lot of time with her family and friends, and as I said, has a job, and now is even going on holidays with friends, which is a pretty incredible story. So CBD products. This guy on the left here is the classic product that everyone thinks of as the CBD oil. As you can see here, it's food supplement. It has to be stated as food supplement in Europe. And that's what people really think of when they hear CBD, because it's, other than inhalation, so when you inhale something, whether it's whether you're smoking or you're vaping something, or whatever it is, you're burning something and kind of inhaling the condensation, that's the fastest and most efficient way to get something into your system, because it basically gets past the barrier that is set up in your stomach. So your stomach is naturally quite a toxic and aggressive environment. It's there to kill off pathogens, kill off bacteria and everything. And it's the same with drugs. They break down these drugs, the acids break down these drugs, and then when it gets past the stomach, goes into the liver, then the liver breaks them down. The liver is the reason we have the liver is to break down things that are bad for us and also good for us, but to break them down nonetheless. So when you, let's say, take a food product, let's say you take some people make CBD gummies just because they taste nicer. With CBD, it's quite an earthy taste, kind of like a grass taste almost. That's hard to get away from. But also, if you taste a CBD oil that doesn't have that, I'd be quite skeptical on what else they're adding into it, because it is such a strong earthy taste. You kind of expect that taste and you almost want it, because it gives you a good indication of how pure it is. Now, of course, there are flavors, like we put flavors into ours. Everyone puts flavors. Every company puts natural, well, not natural, but we put natural flavorings into it to kind of not mask it, but definitely to make it more tolerable. But that's kind of a standard across the industry. But yes, so when it comes to the products, so I was talking about the foods and drinks. When you go into your system, they pretty much it all gets broken down. So that's why these oils are the most favorable option. Now, inhalation, we have a lot of people, a lot of guys and girls that come to us, men and women that have fibromyalgia, and what they do is they were asking us to bring in a vape kind of product, because, as I said, it brings you straight into your lungs. There's no barrier to get past. It is directly gets into your blood vessels, and that's the number one thing you need. You need it to get into the blood vessels so it can be distributed around your body and have an effect. Whereas if you get into your stomach, broken down, very little of CBD gets into your blood vessels. So going back to the oils as well, naturally they're oil-based, not water-based. People take them under the tongue. So the reason for that is to bypass the stomach, bypass the intestines and the liver, where stuff is broken down, and you leave it there for between 60 to 90 seconds. The reason for that is because under your tongue, there's a huge amount of blood vessels. It's very rich in blood vessels. And therefore, what you're doing when you're leaving it under the tongue is allowing it get through into these blood vessels so it can distribute around the body and, again, bypass the stomach. That's why oils are a more effective method of taking CBD and these products than, let's say, tablets and capsules. Certainly foods, drinks, you can get some effervescent drinks, i.e. that are fizzy. They'd be better than normal foods, because the effervescence brings it into your blood system or blood vessels faster. But at the same time, there's still not enough CBD, really. They'd have to be jam-packed with CBD to really have the optimal effect. Topicals, the creams I mentioned, they're not for a system-wide benefit. They're for a targeted benefit. So, for example, we have a lot of people that have arthritis, that have inflamed joints, inflamed muscles. Also, we have a lot of athletes that come to us that just have tired muscles and joints. That we have this here, the muscle and joint recovery cream. That is more for a targeted effect. It has an instant effect. There's menthol in it. So if anyone who knows Biofreeze, it has that cooling effect. So there's arnica in it. There is aloe vera, comfrey, and camphor, 2 natural anti-inflammatories as well, along with CBD. So it's that's why topicals are a big thing in this industry, because the targeted effect. And then, so going back to the oils here, the problem with oils is your body is naturally a water-based system. So it's 50 to 70% of your body is made of water. Oils don't mix with water very well. If you think of just dropping an olive oil into a glass of water, it'll just sit at the top. Even if you mix it around, it might disperse small little globules around. At the end of the day, it'll come up to the top and it'll just sit there. So we've actually brought out these products now, again, coming purely science point of view. that are water soluble. So we have this technology that we use, that we work with these guys in the States with this technology, that we can now make a water soluble CBD oil. So it's more of a CBD water, if you want to call it that. But what it does is it gets into your system much faster. Your body doesn't kind of fights off oils, and it doesn't really, they're difficult to absorb. So when you get it into a water-based system, it's much easier to get into your body. But yeah, so our big thing is nano CBD oils. So as I said, the biggest problem with CBD is that there's loads of studies done on how well it is absorbed, or actually how badly your body absorbs it. So of these studies, it ranges between, based on different people's metabolism and everything. You can't give an exact percentage, but it's between 6 to 18% of these CBD oils absorb into your bloodstream, which is awful. And that means, especially they're quite expensive products. They range from really €35 to up to, you can get CBD oils that are €180. So considering it's an expensive enough product, if only 6 to 18% of it is actually getting into your body, well, a minimum of 82% is being broken down and passed through the system, which is obviously not great. And it's the same with paracetamol and that kind of thing. Now it's higher than 6 to 18%, but it's the body it fights off anything that you've introduced to it and breaks it down. That's just what it's there for. And when we've introduced this nanotechnology, so you can see here, let's say this is a basketball. Let's say that's the typical size of a CBD molecule. We've now brought it down to the size of a marble. So it's approximately 50 times smaller than the typical CBD molecule. And if you think about that, if it's smaller, it's like pouring sugar on floorboards. If you have a cube of sugar, it's not going to fall through the floorboards. If you have grains of sugar, thin sugar, it'll fall through the floorboards. So if you think about it that way, if you have smaller CBD molecules, it'll get into your blood cell, or sorry, not your blood cells, but your cells much easier. And then if it gets into your cells easier, it's in the bloodstream. So it's basically how much can you get your CBD to absorb. And now we've, with our partner in the States, we've published a study, which is a big thing in this industry, bringing the absorption up to 90%. Now, not everyone has the 90%, but the highest we've brought it to is 90% in some people, and the lowest is about 78%. Even still, we're bringing the absorbability, which this is called bioavailability, how much can get into your cells and how much can be used. We've brought it up 5 to 6 times any other CBD oil that's on the market, and that's our USP, that's our selling factor. And at least for a while, no one's going to replicate that because it's a patented nanotechnology, it's a patented process. And it's, unless people find out their own way of doing it, it's not going to be replicated because it's protected by the patent. But it's quite, like, in theory, it's very simple. It's like putting something through a sieve. It's just making something big, bringing it down to a small level. And the smaller it is, the smaller it can fall through the cracks that of your cells. So your cells naturally have to take in loads of stuff. So they've loads of kind of gates. If you can, the smaller the CBD molecule, the easier it gets through these gates. And once this becomes kind of a widespread technology, I mean nanotechnology in general, not just with CBD, but you bring it. So turmeric, for example, turmeric is a hard to absorb compound, and the average turmeric product out there, only 3% of it actually gets into your cells. We've nanoed it, so nanofied it, i.e. brought it down smaller, and that's why we also have turmeric in our CBD oils. That's also nanoed. We've brought that 3% absorption rate up to 70%. And like, that's more than 30 times the absorption rates. So a little bit goes a lot further. That means for the customer, the same price can get you a much stronger product. It'll last much longer. So you're getting essentially just more bang for your buck. And this is something now that we're going to bring into we're going to bring into other nutraceutical companies. So a nutraceutical is something like turmeric or something like that. Just a food compound that is hard to absorb. Anything fat-based, really, you can think of. If you nanofy them, that's what we're going to do now. We're going to bring them down smaller, and then it brings up the amount. So at the end of the day, the customer will get big rewards in that the stuff will be cheaper to produce, because you only have to use a fraction of what traditionally had to be used. Now, moving on from there, and medications. As I said earlier, because the studies are so premature and they're very much in their only preliminary studies really have been published. It's hard. There's not enough studies that kind of that can allow someone give a firm stance on whether it does or it doesn't interact with medication. So sorry, DDIs are drug to drug interactions. So there is in 2013, Epidiolex, the drug I mentioned, the only FDA approved drug on the market at the moment that's for epilepsy. They in order to get a product onto the market, you have to do mountains and millions of dollars worth of studies to show its efficacy, to show its safety, to show its interaction, toxicology, everything, all sorts of stuff. It takes years. So they did a drug-to-drug interaction study, and they found that there were no drug-to-drug interaction problems or side effects. Now, on the other hand, in recent years, there are specific enzymes found in the liver. So let's just call them little robots, essentially, to make it easier, that their job is to specifically break down drugs in the liver. And these are called CYP enzymes. They're only found in the liver. And CBD, there was one very preliminary study that showed that it interacts with one of the enzymes that metabolizes drugs, specific drugs, chemotherapy drugs, warfarin, which is a blood thinner, anticonvulsants. So they're drugs taken for epileptic seizures, so anti-epileptics. And it is found that with this enzyme, it can either make them more effective or less effective. So there's different studies that both contradict each other. That's why the studies they're not big enough yet. The fact that two different studies literally say the opposite. So one says, oh, it makes this enzyme more effective, i.e. it breaks down more drug, therefore you have to take more. When then the other study said the opposite, saying, oh, you have to take less because it makes it underactive, i.e. there's more drug in your system, less of it been broken down. So it's difficult to it's difficult to have a stance on this, really, because there's just not enough studies, because it's only, as I said, all the studies have only just started really from 2015 onwards, mainly 2018 to be honest. But another study in 2015, they looked at CBD intake when people for people with that have epilepsy that are taking anticonvulsants, so anti-epilepsy drugs, one called clozapam. And this study in particular said that when people are taking these anti-epileptics, there is no difference on these enzymes. So there's one that says it does too much. There's one that says it does too little, and then another one that says it doesn't do anything with other drugs. So you can see that it's quite difficult. Now, the WHO in 2000, and I think it was the end of 2018, the same year the Farm Bill was passed in the States. They did a huge study, and naturally, because the WHO, they're not funded by pharma or anything like that. They're pure like academics, and they just want safety and they want efficacy. They want to see that our drug works, and they want to see that it's safe. So they did their own independent study, which was the best. the best. It was a big, it's been a pillar in this industry since they published it, because they did the studies and on people, not just kind of animals or rats or anything like that. It was a study on people, and they came out with a statement saying CBD is extremely safe. You can't overdose on it, and it is non-addictive. So those 3 points that they made kind of really kick-started the industry even more so than it did in at the start of that year from the Farm Bill. So it's all the more studies that are done, the better for this industry, because it's so new, it's such a new industry. But any big studies that are coming out, they will tend to have positive results. Now, of course, there are some that have contradictory results, but at the end of the day, anyone that looks at results, anyone that looks at anything that's published online, make sure to look at who's doing them. Naturally, you want like a research body to be doing them, like Harvard Medical School or something like that. And then how many people are involved, and also who are the people involved? Are they just one age group? Is it just men? Is it just women? You want basically a selection of everyone. Is it just people from the US? Is it just people from the UK? You want to mix and match of every ethnicity, every age, everyone, kind of, as you can imagine. It makes it much more accurate.